You're a talk show animal. You're like one of those goddamn creatures out of Greek mythology. Half man, half desk.
Welcome to the Oilfield Leader Podcast.
Welcome back, everybody. Today we are speaking with Holly Sexton, CPA, and Crystal Rao, CFP, MBA. And these ladies, they live in Midland, Texas, and so they understand what it's like to be working in the oil field. We talk about money, financial planning, taxes, and a whole lot more. Whether you're just starting out on the oil field, you've been working for a while, or you're looking to get out. We have a lot of information that's very valuable, and I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. You guys watch auto racing?
No.
Or you have your husband in auto racing or anything? No. There's something called a rolling start. Because you could start at with the flag at the beginning, and everyone from zero starts. But then sometimes everyone will be in formation, and they'll go around the track, and as they're at speed, then they'll go ahead and they'll wave the flag and the track and the race starts. So that's a running start. So we got a running start.
Perfect.
Perfectly natural.
Yeah.
So Holly Sexton and Crystal Rao. This seems like a very powerful combination to take care of your money. Who found who?
Well, we've both been in here officing in second story, and I think I approached her in the bathroom of all places. Is that right? Is that how you remember it? Yes.
Men have very interesting conversations in the bathroom too. Don't worry about that. Well, very cool. Go ahead.
And then we didn't work together right away.
Yeah, I didn't really know what she did. I knew she was a CPA, but I didn't know the way she explained it. It was different than how other CPAs work.
So how did we start? Who was the first person we were like, we need to work on this person together?
I needed to find a CFO for one of my clients.
A chief financial officer?
Yes.
Wow.
And I asked her and she said, "Oh yeah, I do all that." And
Well, first I said, no, I'm not a CFO. And then I walked back to my office and I was like, what is a CFO? So I Googled it.
Right.
And I was like, I do all of those things.
Right.
So then I went back up to her and I was like, yes, I do all of those things. And then I called the guy. We missed each other a couple times, and I don't do anything for him, but that's what started the relationship.
Interesting. It's funny that you say that because it also happens with a lot of guys in the oil field too. It's like we don't realize how much we actually know until we stop and like, oh, holy crap, I actually know a butt ton about this. We just don't really think about that. When guys are working in the oil field and they start making a ton of money they've never made before, I think the big thing they do is they go buy a truck. I mean, I don't think there's any secrets to that, right? But why don't you guys tell me a funny story about someone who got crosswise in a really bad way, like someone who made a financial choice that was really not a good choice, and then wound up having to dig themselves out of a bad hole.
Oh, it happens all the time, especially with vehicle purchases.
Really?
When I first moved to Midland and being in this area where there is a lot of new money, so to speak, like people are coming into money that they've never made before, vehicle purchase is naturally one of the first things that people want to do. And so I was at a car dealership and I was talking to one of the salesmen and asked, so do people just come in and just pay cash? And he kind of chuckled and said, it's the highest payment that they can afford. Literally, that's what they spend their money on, is how much car can I afford? That's the payment. And I come across it still to this day. People just go out and make a big purchase on a depreciating asset.
Right. And that's the funniest thing is that, I understand if you're young and you've got money and you want the Hellcat, I guess, right? Or you want the hemp. I get it. It's sexy. It's pretty. The blue looks really good in the light. I get it. But like you said, it's a depreciating asset. The value of that just goes down the toilet further and further and further. Have you met any people who, once they have gotten themselves backwards, did they learn their lesson, or do they keep making the same mistakes?
Typically, people do learn their lessons, but there is something that goes hand in hand with behavioral finance. How you were raised with money growing up. Did your family have a lot of money? Did you live in a situation where your parents were living paycheck to paycheck. And a lot of times that's where you see the repeat mistakes, are people that came from households where they didn't know how to manage money, or they weren't taught how to manage money. And it's just more of, let's live in the present. Let me buy all the things. I'm going to be happy now. Not really thinking into the future of what will be.
Right. That's fascinating. And I don't really hear that term very often, behavior finance. But you're right, because people can only do what they're familiar with and what they see and what they know. And if people around them are not very good at handling their money, well, chances are you're not going to be very good either until something happens. Can you, because everybody has a context, right? Everybody has a story and everyone has a family. Can you go down that list again about like some of those things in behavioral finance?
I don't really know them off the top of my head as far as, how they go hand in hand exactly, but there is such a strong correlation with whether your parents talked about it, whether you were exposed to, like, this is how much money we're bringing in, this is how much goes to the bills, and this is how much we have left over. Are we saving it? Are we spending it? Are we doing something that's going to make us money in the future? Your money making money, essentially. Right. So,
in the conversations you were brought in on,
yes,
what you were exposed to, a lot of people I find, if their parents made $100,000, that's their limit. Like, it's safe to make $100,000. Any more than that, and I don't want to make any more than that because I don't want to pay the taxes, and it's scary. So there's a safe.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Right. But isn't that also a lot of hocus pocus? Like, believing a lot of things that aren't true. Like, oh, if I go, okay, true, maybe if you go over a certain point, you're in a new tax bracket, but there are things you can do to mitigate that. Like, why would you not want to make as much money as you possibly could?
Absolutely. But it goes back to that comfort level, what they know, what they've seen, what they've seen work, what they've seen day to day, and how they know how that operates. Put them in a different tax bracket, and they don't know how that operates, how that saves.
Right.
Yeah, I wish I had the study in front of me, but I read something that kids that were raised in a certain neighborhood are almost destined to be in that same tax bracket as adults, because that's the people that they were exposed to, that's the neighborhood they were raised in. And I think a lot of it really does go back to education and what they were exposed to.
Right. No, that's brilliant. Because again, everybody has a place that they come from and a family and a reason how they got into the oil field. In the background of, like you say, like their family, and are they making enough money? Are they comfortable? How do they spend their money? How do they live? I just need, I just need a small house, and internet, and a Hellcat.
I was going to say that.
Right, and a Hellcat.
And that fabulous truck.
Right, exactly. And I'm going to say this on air. I don't care, because it's true. But near my home, there's a guy who lives in what I'm going to technically consider a shit shack. The man lives in a shit shack. He has cats giving birth on his front porch on a disabled stove that doesn't belong there. However, there's a brand new black Maserati in front.
Nice.
So I've taken pictures of that, and I call that Maserati in front of a shit shack. Like, how twisted are your priorities? So you can imagine, I'm going to come and show off to you, but heaven forbid you follow me to see it. Don't come to my house.
You're not invited over for the barbecue.
Right. It's hilarious because it works on some levels because people do it. But that will only get you so far. Number one, because Maseratis are a pain in the ass to maintain, from what I've read. But at some point, where does someone say, I've made enough money, I'm making good money, but I want to make more. I want to do more, and I'm not the smartest person. Because I'll tell you, I'm not the smartest person on the planet. But I know there's people smarter than me who are doing smart things. What are some of those things that we can copy that are smart? Like, let's take an example. Let's say I'm a green hat, which is you're new in the oil field, right? Or let's say you're in 2 years in the oil field. You know you're going to keep working for a few more years, and you're earning some money. What would be a smart thing for that young person to do other than contributing in their 401k at their job? Because I think that's a given. Because if you don't contribute to your 401k, you're giving away free money, and that's stupid. So definitely that. But after that, what should someone be thinking about?
I think the first thing would be to have an appointment with Crystal and go over what their goals are. Because what is it? Shit Shack?
Your Shit Shack, yeah.
He may be meeting his goals, and his goal is to have a fabulous car, and he may be saving money and living in a shit shack.
Right.
And be happy, you know?
Right.
That's the first thing, is having an appointment. What are your goals? And then gearing your savings in that direction, because you can have two of those guys come in with very different goals, and their lifestyles are going to look very different potentially.
Right.
And that's what I was going to say, is maybe that guy that drives the Maserati, that's a priority for him.
Absolutely.
Everybody's priorities are different, right?
Absolutely.
So it does go back to figuring out what your goals are, where you find value, what you want your life to look like now and in the future. And maybe it is just the Maserati and the Shit Shack. Who knows?
Right.
No, but that's a brilliant, but actually that's a brilliant point, and you open my eyes in the sense that, I see the Maserati, and so I think that he's trying to attain to a certain level of status. We'll use that word, right? But I'm like, but if you're looking for status, living in a shit shack is not the way to go. However, but you're right, because so many times I grew up in New York City, and I'll readily say, yeah, if you're young in your 20s, you should go live in New York City, but you're only going to have money to pay your rent, and that's it, and then go out. You're not going to have any savings, but that's okay, because your priority is to be young, your priority is to party, your priority is to have a good time and get it. I get it. So maybe the guy with the Maserati, for all I know, maybe he's, I don't know, black marketing kittens, and he's got plenty of money, and, he's happy, and he has to maintain that trap house. I don't know. But you make me think, because you're right. Some people are completely happy with what they have, and it wouldn't be. And it's not like if people are happy, I want to push them to be happier. No. You need a bigger shit shack.
That's not
right. No.
Yeah, that's not enough. I need you. You're happy to look like my happy is basically how a lot of people view it, but that's not the case for anyone.
And posing what's important to you on other people, that never goes well.
Right.
And I would say that's how she and I work from different angles. I'm not just doing your tax return at year-end based on some forms you brought me, and she's not getting stocked at, I don't know, how would you say it, earning a certain percentage for you or a fee for you. We sit down and we say, what's your goal with this purchase? And where do you see that in 5 years? And maybe we can move things around and plan, not just, okay, what did you do? Tell me. Write it on a piece of paper. See you next year.
Right. I think that the hard thing is that when people can't answer a question, it's generally they don't know the answer, or they're afraid of the answer, or afraid of finding the answer. And literally, they could be the most hardworking, good-hearted, well-intended person. They're just perfect. And you're like, okay, what are your goals? And I got no freaking clue. I have got zero clue what my goals are. And I think a lot of guys are like that. Again, good people. And I'm sure you've also seen it in your own business, right?
Absolutely.
It's just, what are my goals? I have no idea. I'm just so busy working, I didn't even know I was allowed to have freaking goals. No one told me I was even allowed to have freaking goals. And I think that we do find a lot of people in that situation. So if you're making a lot of money, right, someone needs to talk. If you're in the field and you're making more money than you've made before, and you don't have a lot of responsibilities, you don't have a family, you don't have a house, this is the time to talk to someone like Crystal and to Holly. This is the time. Before things start going sideways, right, to use a term that you all know very well. Because money shit's going to go sideways on you very quickly. And unfortunately, it goes badly for you exponentially fast. So that's why you want to be on top of your game, and you want to already have a game plan. I'm sure you guys watch a lot of football, whatever, right? You just don't go out on the field and just fucking wing it. You go with a coach. You go with someone who's an expert in what they're doing. And if you're making a ton of money, believe me, everybody wants you to have your Hellcat. And we're not telling you can't have your Hemi. No one's saying you can't have that. You can have it. But you need to have some other things in place too. So what happens when someone, let's say, Holly, that they they're making a good amount of money and they want to do some kind of a business or they want to invest some kind of money. How would that affect them tax-wise? Or like you say, as opposed to just being a tax preparer at the end of the year, what does it mean when you have, because a lot of guys also, they have businesses. What does it mean when you have a business and you're also trying to maximize your tax
So if someone
advantage?
comes in and says they're starting a small business, we talk about what type of business it is. Then there's different types of tax classifications, entity types that we can choose based on what they're doing, if they want to pay themselves. And then if they're not paying themselves from their business, they're going to have to make estimated tax payments. And if they can't change their withholding to cover the business, or if there's not going to be a loss, we almost need to look at it quarterly, at their quarterly activity, so we can make those quarterly estimates. And then as they grow, making sure that they're making the purchases in the right place. I'm trying to think what else that would be before I see anything. Really, it's going to be paperwork in the beginning, making sure that they're set up right with the IRS, with the Secretary of State, that they have their bank account, that they're keeping everything separate.
Right, keeping their money separate and never commingling
Right.
funds, personal monies and bank accounts.
It's just keeping
right.
yourself safe.
Right. And and I think this is a very fascinating area, and I think that one that we may come back to in another episode and specifically discuss starting a small business. Now we just want to talk about money in general, in the field, but a lot of the guys who work in the oil field, their goal is to get out. And a lot of guys, not every one of them, but a lot of guys want to start their own businesses. And they have a rough idea of that, and they may be getting close to that or thinking about getting close to that. But when you're ready to make that kind of a move and you need to choose a business entity, a legal entity, LLC, S Corp, and then how to be taxed, you definitely need to speak to an expert. And
Absolutely. Because the wizard that's on the IRS website, it's not very clear. It'll ask you some questions and it's helpful, but you need to have some inside knowledge on today that may be okay, but in 5 years, depending upon what you're doing, we are not doing that. We've just screwed ourselves.
Right. And it's not how much money you make, it's how much money you keep.
Right.
That's the main
After
thing.
expenses, your net income.
Right, it's your net income. And it would make a lot of sense for anyone to try to find the best way to minimize their tax liability, whether it's making certain investments like a 529, right, or a 401k, because those can be tax advantage. Actually, one of the questions that came in from some of our listeners was about what's the difference between a regular 401k and a Roth 401k? Well,
Yeah, that's pretty easy. So a regular 401k, when you put the money in, it actually lowers your taxable income. Hence, you get that tax deduction, so to speak. So money grows tax deferred, and you actually don't pay any taxes on it until you withdraw it in retirement, just like you're drawing another paycheck, right? But paying yourself.
okay, and now is that different from a Roth?
It is. So the Roth, it's different in that the money that you put in, you don't get the tax deduction, but the huge benefit is that it grows completely tax-free.
There you go.
Which, to me, I would much rather always do the Roth, just because, even if you're in a high tax bracket, because we don't know what tax rates are going to be in the future, and it's almost like you're getting a discount today, unless you're just in a very exponentially high tax bracket right now. But
Right.
a lot of times I prefer the Roth over everything else.
Right. And that's brilliant, because a lot of guys have that question, and I think that you stated it very, very simply, which is the regular one cuts right out of your paycheck. So you get a tax deduction because now it's not money you're putting in your pocket, but you put away. So you get a deduction immediately. But the problem is that when it comes time to retire, you're going to get taxed on that money, and no one knows what it's going to look like in the future.
Right.
The other way, and this is what I've chosen to do independently, was a Roth. So what that means, guys, is that after I've gotten my pay and they've taken all the deductions and the insurance and all the taxes and everything out, with my money that's left over, I've invested that money. And because that money was income and it's already been taxed from the employer, that's why I'm able to put it in as there's no tax on it when I go to withdraw it. I do agree. I think that that's the best way to do it. Would you recommend that everyone do a 401k? And if they do, what percentage should they put?
So the 401ks are really great because they have higher contribution limits than a typical IRA that you just do outside of your employer. And so this year specifically, it's $22,500 versus IRA Roth that you can only do $6,500. And the 401k is typically my first choice, one for the higher contribution limits, but also to take advantage of the employer match. Because like you said before, if you're not taking advantage of that, that's just 100% return on your money that you're leaving on the table.
Yeah.
Why do that?
Right.
Yeah, so definitely I like the 401k first and foremost, and then dabbling into the Roth or traditional if it benefits you, health savings accounts, all of those employer benefits that are offered to you. Those are all things that you should be taking advantage of.
Right, because in a way, and this is not to knock HR departments at all, but HR is there for the company, not there for you. If they're giving you any kind of a benefit, you should jump on it because there is a reason why it's there.
Yeah, usually it's required, so that there's equality among the highly compensated owners, employees, and the people that aren't as highly compensated.
Right. Well, and in the oil field, guys who work in the field, they're waking up at 3:30 in the morning to be out on location by 5 because they've got a safety meeting at 5:30. They're pretty decently compensated. Now, they're blue collar, right? We're not talking white collar, like you say, cruising to the office in a Maserati. But obviously their money is just as important to them. What would you say if someone wants to start a family? Maybe he's got a girlfriend or a lady got a boyfriend and they're like, I'm seriously thinking about getting married and I'm ready to commingle finances. What are some of the things I need to do to be ready for that? Like, so how would someone get ready to buy a home and get married? Let me ask you this question real quick. Should couples have joint bank account or should they keep separate accounts?
It depends. It depends on the couple. It depends on a host of different factors. So I always tell people you need to do what works for you. And we're really good about setting up systems in place because a lot of the times you have a joint bank account and you're spending money, but you're spending money that was supposed to be bill money. And so, that's where a lot of fights tend to happen is,
right.
You spent the water bill or...
Right.
So if you're going to have a joint account, one of my favorite things to do is to set up separate checking accounts for separate things. So for example, you can have a joint account, but you have to have a joint account where all of your money goes in to pay the bills.
Right.
And because you sat down and did the work and understand what your expenses are, you should know how much you have left over as free money to spend, which can go into a spending account. I use air quotes there.
I got you.
That way, you're not spending the bill money. You're keeping things separate, and you're staying on the same page as far as, are we paying our bills? We're taking money out for savings, and then we're only spending what we have left over.
Let me ask you this. In your experiences, have you come across guys who say, I let my wife handle all the bills?
Yes.
I know nothing about the money. My
Yes.
job is to make the check, and I give it to my wife. I know zero after that. Do you come across that?
All the time.
Yep. I'm one of those women.
Right. Okay. Interesting. Now, obviously, you're both. Do you find that that's an advantage, or again, is it one of those? It depends.
It depends who is more financially responsible and knowledgeable and wants to do it, because it can get away from you very quickly. I would say if there were a couple coming in saying, I'm thinking about getting married, my first thing would be, is she caught up on her taxes? Do
Right.
we know what's going on? Are we going to get a surprise? Married filing jointly. All of those, let's put everything out on the table. We can fix it. We can move forward. But if it's a surprise, it's not going to be that great.
So definitely make sure that your partner is not a financial train wreck.
Right. Like, you know, do you have the same goals? Are you aligning? Because today it may be like, oh, she goes to Starbucks too many times. And then in 5 years, it'll be like, holy cow, we could have bought a Starbucks.
Right, we could
you
have
know?
bought a Starbucks, right. Right. No, that's a very good point. Because I've met a lot of guys in the field, that's what they do. They hand over their checks to their wives, and they're like, I get an allowance. And then they're proud as shit to show me their Cash App card. That's like, oh, my wife puts my money on here. I'm like, okay. Good for you. Okay. All right. I don't get it, but okay. But again, everyone is different, and everyone manages their money different. And no, if I was piss poor at math, I would be the wrong person to push to the front of the stage for the math contest. So you're right? If someone is not good and they cop to it, which means copping to it and admitting is like, I'm no good at this, I think is better than trying to put up a front, right? And fake it till you make it, because then the wheels are going to come off that cart real
quickly,
fast.
right?
Real quickly. So I understand that. I understand that very well.
And that goes back to our point of, let's sit down, let's talk about your goals. Where are we? Where do we want to be? Is that where you both want to be? Are we doing what we need to be? Right. Or maybe we need to keep things separately. You know, it's going to be very individualized.
That's so important. That there's very few things, I think, that are one-size-fit-all answers. Very few things that fit that, especially in finance. Because it all depends on what the person's income is, what their expenses are, and then what their goals are. That's everything. And so, you know, maybe not everyone wants to start a business. Some guys do, but most guys, they just want to be operators. They just want to get to work, do their thing, and, you know, man, enjoy life, because life is hard enough, and I respect that. I respect the shit out of that. But for those guys who don't want to be left behind, when it comes to, am I doing everything to save the money I'm making? Like, what are the top 3 things that someone could do to save money, regardless of whatever their goal is? What are the top 3 things someone could do?
401k, health savings account, and just managing your investments tax efficiently.
Okay.
So I would say the 401k, the HSA, and then make sure your withholding matches your tax return.
Oh, could you explain that a little bit?
Where, say you're a young guy, you only have a W-2, but you're at your job, you're investing in your 401k, you're contributing to your HSA, you're taking advantage of all the matches, and that we have your federal withholding matching what you need at year end, so you're not hit with a surprise tax bill. So basically, you're reporting at year end, you're covered. I don't like to see people getting huge refunds or having to owe. I like that nice break even.
Me too.
Because now they have the money, right, to invest or to do their spending or whatever they want. But it's not oh my gosh, here comes April. I'm about to go get the bad news and I have to write a fat check with penalty and interest included. No, I've contributed to my 401k. I have contributed to my HSA, and I don't have a huge tax bill because I've taken care of that year round. I'm good. Everything's flowing.
Right.
Those are the top 3 things for a W-2 earner, I would say.
And I think when it comes to finances, the biggest thing is the least amount of volatility you have, the more peace of mind you have. And that's, at the end of the day, what I see that people crave. They just want to know that things are going to stay the same month to month. No surprises,
right.
No $9,000 checks.
Right. But for that, someone has to be smart enough to know, to get the information that they need to, and it's almost like set it and forget it. Once you get involved and you say, okay, I need to know what is my liabilities, how many dependents, right? All these things to fill out. What's the form when you start a job?
W-4.
W-4. Thank you very much. And I think you said you can go back to HR and change your W-4 anytime you want.
Right.
Right. Make sure that the W-4 is filled out in such a way that at the end of the year, you don't owe and you don't get a refund.
Some people like to get that refund because they use it as their savings account. I don't personally prefer that, but I will always ask my client, are you looking to get, what sort of a refund are you looking for? Because we're going to plan for that.
Well, but maybe people do that just because they're so used to being taken all the time. It's like, I'm getting taxed out the wazoo so what's the big deal if you keep taxing me this way? I'm already used to the stress. It's almost like an ox with a yoke on it. It's like, I'm already carrying the yoke, whatever. At least you're going to tell me, see, I could take the yoke off of you, but what is $1 every step going to do for you? Nothing. I would rather carry that yoke and you show me that $9,000 refund at the end. Right?
Yeah, and that's a preference thing. That is totally a preference thing.
Interesting.
See, when I see a big refund online, I'd be thinking, man, I messed up.
Right.
Yeah.
I messed up. Well, and the funny thing is, again, it's just a question of perspective and of goals. So you're a professional, so you see things differently, right? Like for me and the average guy, like getting a refund is like, well, holy cow, I worked my ass off. At least I got this back to me. And I can see the logic of how that makes sense. But guys, we need to be a little bit smarter than that. Right? We need to take another step, which is why we're even here talking with Crystal and Holly about how to get smarter and move ahead. And part of it, again, is keeping more of what you make.
Right.
And this is really invaluable. I want to ask two specific questions. One about a 529, which I think is a college savings. And then I want to ask you guys about some of the financial advice that we see online, like on TikTok and on Instagram and things like that. But you were mentioning vehicles, right? So you've got, and what do I mean by vehicle? You're talking about an investment vehicle, like your retirement account, your 401k, a health savings account that Holly mentioned, right? Your HSA. And then you have a 529, which from what I recall is an account that you can put money into to use for college. But how do the taxes for that work? Is it pre-tax, post-tax?
Yeah, so when you put the money in, you don't actually get a tax deduction, at least in Texas. Some states will give you a state tax deduction, but you don't get a tax deduction on your federal taxes. The money does grow tax deferred, and then when used on qualified educational expenses, that growth is what the benefit is on, right? Because you got that tax-free growth on that money that you put in.
In the 529, that's money that would be shaved right out of my paycheck? Or is that okay, so see, if it's shaved out of my paycheck, that's pre-tax.
So you don't get a tax deduction.
Okay, you don't get it.
It would almost be like just after-tax dollars going in.
So it's sort of like a Roth,
Okay.
right? And then because we're here in Texas and don't have a state tax, there's no benefit on that line. But like I'm from Louisiana, and you do get, if you have, I want to say it has to be a Louisiana plan, because each state has a plan.
It does.
Yeah. Okay. So we would there, but that's not the most attractive thing of a 529. For me, it's that it gets to grow, like she said. And then if it's for, do they use the word beneficiary? What do they use for it?
Yeah, it's a beneficiary.
Yeah, so like if my kid, I'm like, I have one kid, but say my oldest kid, here's this 529, and she decides not to go to college, and I have a balance in there, well, then I'm dropping down to my second kid, and they get to exhaust it, right?
Yes, and you can even transfer it to yourself if you want to go back to school. You can give it to your grandkids. The best thing about it now, because a lot of people used to be hesitant to contribute to them, like what if my kid doesn't go to school?
Or me, I did not until she told me what she's about to say. I have a single kid, and I thought, I'm not wasting it putting it in a 529, because what am I going to do with it?
Right.
Yeah, so end of 2022, Congress passed the Secure 2.0 Act, and the new rule is if your kid or whomever doesn't use that balance, you can move up to $35,000 of the plan into a Roth IRA to benefit that beneficiary.
Okay, so I can take the money and I can slide it into something, another investment vehicle, but I can't take the cash.
Right.
Okay.
So it's still going to be for the benefit of the kid, but instead of, hey, I'm going to fund your college, I'm going to say, hey, I'm funding your retirement.
Yeah, so used to you would contribute to a 529 and your kid got a full ride, let's say.
Right.
And now you have this 529 with all this growth, and the only way it was beneficial is if you used it toward qualified education expenses. But now you don't have those. So now you have to withdraw it. But since this Secure Act, you get to transfer it to a Roth, and now it's their retirement account that you have funded.
Wow. And you know what what I really love about that is that it segues into this phrase that I think that we hear a ton about, but no one has a clue: generational wealth. Right? I mean, you hear this all the time. Oh, you gotta start generational wealth by having universal life, and you gotta do this. And, it's like, okay.
Sounds great.
It sounds great.
Yeah.
Right? Sure, who doesn't want generational wealth? I would love to see my son fly around on a Gulfstream 10 by that point. But let's face it, that's such bullshit. And it is not going to happen for 11 out of 10 people. It is not. Not the way that they're selling it to you. Because you see, generational wealth starts with going and seeing a tax advisor, going and speaking to a financial planner before you begin doing shit. See, that's how smart people do things, is they begin to get the information before they begin to spend. What would you tell me about that? Because I see a lot of that financial advice, like to start a whole life policy or universal life. Can you tell me a little bit of the difference? Like because everyone in the oil field, obviously, listen, nobody wants to die, but it's going to happen, and we have life insurance. What's the difference between term life insurance and whole life insurance?
Yeah, so not to be too long-winded on all of this, but one of the parts of a financial plan is making sure risks are covered, right? So dying is obviously a big risk to your family. They lose that income. They're left with all the things, and disability, So a lot of times you get disability insurance through your employer. You typically get a small term policy through your employer, maybe $50,000.
$50K usually what I see.
One times your salary, something of that nature. People need a lot more life insurance than that. And the difference between term and whole life, term just means that's a set amount for a certain period of time. And so a lot of times if you have kids in the household, all you really need is maybe a 20-year term policy to cover the mortgage, the debt, the college, in case something happens to you during those prime earning years. The idea is when you're younger, you typically have more debt, more liabilities, and not very much in terms of assets. But as those years go on, that flips and you have less in terms of debt, more assets, where the need for life insurance really goes away. So term is inexpensive. It gives you the amount of coverage that you need set for a specific period of time. Whole life is permanent, and it will cover you typically up to the age of 100. It's typically more expensive in terms of premiums, and they do have the ability to borrow from them. You can pay those back. If you don't, your policy will lapse. I am not a fan of permanent or whole life type insurance, only in very specific circumstances. And that's typically if you have a special needs child, where you need to leave something for them so they can still qualify for state benefits. Yeah. Or if you're pushing the inheritance tax exemption limit, which is 12.9 million. So if you're up there in terms of the amount of assets that you have, not just investments, but homes, vehicles, total estate value, then that's a place for permanent insurance sometimes, not all the time, but that's really the big difference that I see. It's not an investment vehicle for the normal person to do.
Right.
For the normal person, get your emergency fund in place first and foremost. I can't tell you how many times I see people without liquid cash on hand.
Right.
And then take advantage of those employer benefits. And then let's talk about whole life insurance.
Right. No, and that's brilliant because again, and sometimes it's not sexy. And that's the thing is that, have a budget. That is not sexy. See, talking about where Bitcoin is going to go, I know a lot of people who invest in that, right? In a lot of the coins and things like that. But that is not, and it's fine to do with your quote unquote play money, after you've gotten your head and your ass wired together properly and spoken with professionals so you can move forward in the right way. You would not go to a brain surgeon to ask them how you need to calibrate, this pump that's, you need to pump chems out of an ISO. You're not going to go talk to a brain surgeon about that. You're going to go talk to a mechanic and an engineer who understands that. Do not talk to your broke Uncle Joe. He doesn't know shit about money, or his ass would not be broke. You need to talk to real financial experts, because their job is money. Their lives are money. And that's what you need to focus on. So let me ask this. Why, if I was not going to do like whole life insurance, if I want to do generational wealth, and I'm being sincere, after I have decided on my goal, spoken with my tax advisor, and set up taking the 401ks, the 529s, the HSAs, after I've done all those smart things, what would be the next thing I would do if I was really serious about taking my money and setting it for the future? What about like a trust? What could someone legitimately do?
Yeah, so the same thing goes with trusts. I mean, they're great to avoid probate, but there's really not a need until you get into the ultra high net worth arena. I don't know what you
Right,
say.
and some of that's because the admin fees and the things that come along with those, they're quite high, and until there's a need, it doesn't benefit you.
Yeah, there are things like a revocable living trust just to bypass probate that, will ease the burden for your beneficiaries. But when you're getting into these different types of trusts that people use for generational wealth, that's
I guess you would look at it like they've already gotten some wealth, grown some wealth, and now they're trying to be smart with it,
Yeah.
and that's how the trusts come about. The trusts don't come first.
There you go. You need to have the money before something like this even helps you. Right.
Before it's beneficial, right?
Having it doesn't do, actually, like you say, it's the opposite, because between the fees and then, like you say, for some things you have to file quarterly. I mean,
Right.
all now you're doing is spending money.
Yeah. Just going to make your life more complicated.
It is.
Right. Right. But it goes back to something you said earlier, which is having peace of mind. And I think ultimately that's what everybody wants. I mean, frankly, about everything, but especially when it comes to money, because money is security, money is choices, money is options. And when you don't have any money, you have no choices and you have no options. I'm thinking that this has been very, very helpful. I think that we have spoken about a lot of issues that are very important to guys. Maybe even hearing some terms for the first time, like fiduciary, right? Like we're hearing some words for the first time. This is not the last episode where we're going to be talking about money and specific money strategies and tactics, like how to save money, like specifics on saving money, specifics on budget. Shit, we're just going to start with like a 101. Like, oh my God, you've got money. What the fuck are you going to do with it? We're going to start like that from the beginning, and we're going to revisit with Holly and with Crystal when we start making enough money to be serious enough to pay professionals. But we need to do this anyway. We need to speak with professionals when you make money, choose your goals, and move forward smartly. I don't think I have anything else. What do you think, Holly?
I think that's good.
Yeah, this has been great.
Anything else we need to add?
Did I forget to ask anything? Was there something you were itching to say?
Did you address what a fiduciary is?
I didn't.
Okay.
But a fiduciary, I said, I didn't say you would know what the word was. I said you heard a word. But fiduciary is someone who actually is legally responsible for your money and making sure that they're making choices that are based strictly on what is best for you, not on what makes them a fee. And so a fiduciary has a higher level of responsibility than any other money manager or money person. They have to be a fiduciary because then they are legally responsible. Is that a good description?
Yes, yeah. You could probably do a whole episode on it. But
Absolutely. Absolutely. But that being the case, I want to thank you all for listening. I want to thank so much for Holly and Crystal for being here and sharing with us, and we look forward to having you guys back on the show. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, what a great conversation we had with Holly Sexton and Crystal Rao. Be sure to check out the description, and you'll find all the contact information for them there. And get ready for the next episode. It's going to be amazing.
The Oilfield Leader Podcast is brought to you by executive producer Daniel Corral, executive producer Jim Lynn, executive producer and voice talent, me, Mad Mac, production assistant Caleb Knott. The Oilfield Leader Podcast is produced and hosted by Christian Lombardini. Copyright 2023. The Oilfield Leader and Christian Lombardini, all rights reserved. Peace.